ESPN's Brooke Pryor is here, coming off a day where Aaron Rodgers goes on the Pat McAfee Show. And Brooke, we were talking some before the pod. I really thought would have a decision on his future. Were you surprised at all where we still don't know? Is he going to retire? Is he going to play for the Steelers? What'd you make of the interview on Thursday?
I am not surprised that he didn't make an announcement on the Pat McAfee show to say what he was going to do. I think that interview went almost exactly as I expected, but in the big picture of things, if you had told me a month ago that we would still be waiting to see what Aaron Rodgers would decide to do and that the Steelers would be okay continuing to wait, that would have surprised me. I don't think the Steelers thought it would take this long. I don't think the players in the locker room thought it would take this long. This free agency, this off season has not gone at all the way the Steelers kind of talked like it would go when the season ended, when we had those wrap up interviews with Mike Tomlin, with Art Rooney, with Omar Khan. I think of the last time we talked to Omar Khan at the Combine, right before the new league year opened, and it was our priority is re-signing either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. We want to get it done before the new league year opens, and we'll go from there. We have to get a quarterback before we do anything else. Well, that has not been at all the way that this offseason has gone. They let Justin Fields walk out the door. They clearly don't have any interest in bringing back Russell Wilson, but they do make a splashy trade for DK Metcalf, bring back Mason Rudolph, and yet this Aaron Rodgers decision still looms large. And so I think that at this point, a lot, this is, I think, the time of year where there's a lot of off-season grades for how teams are doing. And I think the Steelers at this point have an incomplete because we don't know what this quarterback situation is going to be.
Yeah, I almost took it more of an indictment of Rodgers' interaction with new Jets head coach Aaron Glenn. That was like my biggest takeaway, where I still think the possibility of Rodgers joining the Steelers is on the table, but that was like my biggest takeaway from the conversation that he had on Thursday.
Yeah, I think that the what Aaron Rodgers said about being upset that he flew cross country to meet with Aaron Glenn and the new Jets GM, and that the conversation wasn't really a conversation. It was the Jets informing him that they were moving on. And he was really aggrieved by that. He did not like the fact that he flew across the country for, in his words, a meeting that could have been a phone call. And I get that from his perspective, but as you know, my colleagues on Get Up said this morning, if the Jets had called him and said we're moving on, then Aaron Rodgers would have gone on the Pat McAfee show and said, why didn't you bring me in person? Why couldn't you face me in person to have this conversation? To me, while Aaron Rodgers didn't say a whole lot about his future in that interview, it revealed a lot of things that to me would be red flags if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, that he has no problem throwing grenades on his way out the door, that it is all about him always, that he doesn't owe anybody anything. And that's fair. He is not a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's not under contract, but he's sending mixed signals. I feel like you can't essentially soft launch a retirement saying there's a lot of things going on in your personal life, that you're at a different point in your life, et cetera, while also going to work out with DK Metcalf, while also being okay with the photos and videos being released of working out with DK Metcalf, while taking what he thought was a very clandestine, covert trip to Pittsburgh, flying into a different airport, renting a Chevy Malibu, all of these things that you say one thing, but in doing so, you're kind of executing another. And by that, I mean, he went to such great lengths to try to not be revealed that he was in Pittsburgh. But in Pittsburgh, I live about a mile from the facility. The
Yeah.
facility is right next to this like greenway bike path right by the river. So a lot of times on my days off, I will walk from my apartment down to the facility on this bike path, go down a couple miles, but it takes me right by the Steelers facility. And that day that he was in Pittsburgh, March 21st, I went for a walk that morning, and I noticed as I walked by the facility that their side gate was open. And this is not a side gate that is typically open. And as I walked by, I noticed that they were resurfacing the practice fields, and that instead of grass, they're just mounds of dirt. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Like, I'm going to take pictures of this in case anything comes of it. You know, I have over 200,000 photos in my camera roll because of things like this. Because if I notice something that seems kind of off, I'll take a picture, I'll put it in my back pocket. Maybe it'll be relevant. Yes, there's the tweet. Yep. So there are many photos that I took on my approach to that side gate. I couldn't tell you why I specifically took a photo of that car in there, only that I noticed it was weird. I've never seen a car pulled in there before. And so I just took a picture and saved it. And then yesterday on Thursday, when Aaron Rodgers said that that's what he did, he went in a side entrance. I went back on my camera roll, and sure enough, because it was out of the ordinary, I noticed it. If he had just driven in the front gate like everyone else going into that facility and parked in the parking lot among the probably 100, 150 cars that are there, nobody would have known. Like, the security guys checking him in would have known, but like, they dealt with Russell Wilson and Sierra coming through, and they have it just feels like he's doing too much. If he wanted to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, he would be at this point. And if I'm the Steelers, I'm looking at all of these things he's saying, the way that he's carrying himself, while also looking at the way he's played in the last year since his Achilles injury. And I'm not touching him. I am saying, you know what? We went down this road. We did our due diligence. Thank you for coming in. We have got to make other plans that are in our best interest. And at this point, you are not in our best interest.
Brooke, you've been an NFL reporter for a long time. In conversations I've had with players, the sentiment is the same time and time and time again. If you're even contemplating retirement, if one foot's already out the door, this is not a job where you can be halfway in, halfway out. You got to be 10 toes in. So if I'm already hearing that, and again, coming off the Achilles, because for even a player in his prime or in his prime years, that's a tough enough injury to come back from, let alone at the age of 41. He'll turn 42 during the year. The writing's on the wall there to me. So when you say all of these things, it resonates with me because of all the players that you've talked to throughout the course of your media career.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's one thing to be contemplating retirement if it's, am I going to come back and be with the same team? Kind of what Ben Roethlisberger went through in the last years of his career, right? Ben was in a position where I think he had the flexibility to seriously consider those things and then still come back. He's in the same building. He knows everyone. He knows the players. He knows the system. Changed a little bit at the end, but still, I think that you have more space to do that. When you're a free agent and you're considering retirement or going to a brand new team, to the points that have been made since the interview that he had with McAfee, when he came into the Jets and decided to come to the Jets or was traded to the Jets, he was there early for all of the early workouts. Obviously, last year he misses OTAs to go to Egypt or whatever it was. But in the beginning, he was there from day one. He was doing all of the things that you would expect a new quarterback to do, being a man about town, kind of helping the fan base fall in love with you as if they weren't already excited to have him. At this point, it feels like he is hesitant to do that. And that hesitancy would make me really nervous if I'm the Steelers, and it's not doing anything to endear him to the fan base. I can't imagine what the reaction would be if he does come here and starts week one. I mean, the Acrisure Stadium crowd is quick to boo. They will let you know if they do not like you very quickly. There's no honeymoon phase for anyone. And I would not be shocked if they booed Aaron Rodgers coming out because of all of this mixed message, flirting, teasing, whatever it is you want to call it, that he's gone on for the last couple of months. You either want to be a Steeler or you don't. And to me, the interview with Pat McAfee showed all of the reasons why the Steelers should cut bait and move on and try to salvage what they can out of the 2025 season, whether that's drafting a quarterback in the first round, whether that's signing, I think Carson Wentz is still available, or seeing if someone else becomes available once the draft is over, trading for Kirk Cousins, whatever it is. But you've got to move on because Aaron Rodgers is in his own universe.
April the 21st is when the player workouts for the Steelers in the offseason. I talked to Arthur Mote, who played for the Steelers. several years back about, okay, from the player standpoint, that's one thing, but then from coaching to figure out who your personnel is to start to game plan for the upcoming season, there's that challenge. There's the reality of the draft being, it's less than a week away, Brooke. And this is where when Rodgers was saying, well, I'm not holding anyone hostage, you got to make up your mind. Like, you haven't seen you couldn't have foreseen the offseason shaking out how it has, because at this moment in time, it's like join the Steelers, retire, or wait to see if Phantom Team has like an injury at the quarterback position. But he's really out of options. And it's like, it's not that hard to make a decision for one of those three things, Brooke. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Exactly. And the idea of I'm not holding teams hostage, well, the Steelers have kind of volunteered themselves to be hostages in this situation. And I hate to say that anyone looks foolish. That's probably too strong a word, but I go back to less than a month ago when I was standing in front of Art Rooney at owners' meetings in Palm Beach, and he said, we're getting positive signs that he's headed in our direction. We feel good. Like, all of these things that the Steelers, when you look back, hindsight being 2020, you read what Art Rooney said, you rewatch those videos, and you square that with what Aaron Rodgers said on Thursday. Kind of tells you either Aaron Rodgers is telling them one thing behind the scenes and then saying another thing publicly, which that in itself is an issue, or he's never been actually close to signing with the Steelers, and the Steelers are trying to say things publicly to manifest Aaron Rodgers to make a decision, to will him in to making a decision. It just, to me, shows that the Steelers gave up a lot of control in this offseason. They ceded a lot of control to Aaron Rodgers. It's getting late early, or getting early late, whichever the way, however that phrase goes, because I always mess it up. But there's still a week until the draft. Mm-hmm. You have a chance to course correct now. You're running out of time, but they have met with 4 quarterbacks in the pre-draft visits that they hosted. Jackson Dart, Shedeur Sanders, Kyle McCord, and Tyler Shuck. Great. They also did their due diligence in going to pro days, meeting with Jalen Milroe. They saw Quinn Ewers. They saw Will Howard. They have seen those guys. To me, it doesn't appear that they've done their homework on this class as extensively as they did the year that they drafted Kenny Pickett. That would make me a little nervous because they invested so many resources that year into drafting a quarterback, but that didn't work out either. So who's to say that that was the right way to go about things? But they have a chance to kind of retake control of their offseason in the next 6 days, in the next week or so. It's time to do that. It's time to say, all right, Aaron Rodgers, thank you for coming in. This is not going to work. Best of luck to you, whether it's in retirement, whether it's watching Dolphins on your porch, or whether it's signing with the Vikings in August, but we're out.
Yeah, to me, the deadline would be Thursday in advance of the draft, because it impacts how I'm going to approach the draft. I still think they could select a quarterback in the draft, even if Rodgers signs with the Steelers. But if he's not signed with the team in advance of Thursday, you have to be a lot more aggressive in your approach of who you're bringing in purely for depth purposes. Like, Brooke, we're not even talking about the talent in the quarterback room relative to the rest of the league, but we're talking about the fact that you have 2 quarterbacks under contract at this moment in time.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is when I've talked with the Steelers about a deadline, or when not having a complete quarterback room starts to hinder team development, what Mike Tomlin told me was, well, it's really when training camp starts, because the spring is about teaching and educating, and teaching and learning, I think were his phrases, as in, like, that's going to be kind of individual player development, and we're going to get some of that team stuff going when we get to training camp. So that's when we need to have the quarterback room together. But I just don't see them waiting that long. I think that that's something you say to kind of buy yourself some time in the spring. But to me, OTAs and minicamp are still incredibly valuable to have your quarterback there, especially when just a year ago, Mike Tomlin was saying the reason for naming Russell Wilson as the guy in pole position is because it helps the team in team development early, and that's an important part of the team building process. So I feel like that is what he truly believes, that you want to have those things established early. And I feel like the Steelers tried to talk themselves into changing how they do business for Aaron Rodgers, that they were kind of bending over backwards to accommodate him because they felt like he was worth the risk. It was worth changing parts of your identity to get a guy like that in the building. But the longer it takes, the more it appears that he is not coming into that building, and you still have time to go back to who you are at your core. And now's the time to do that. I agree with you that I think Thursday is kind of the deadline, because yes, I think that they could draft a quarterback regardless of if they sign Aaron Rodgers, but it affects when you draft that guy, how much capital you use, which kind of quarterback you draft. If you need to draft a guy that's pro ready that can start day one, like a Shedeur Sanders, or if you can wait until the third round and get a more developmental guy, because also they don't have a second round pick. So even if you say, okay, well, the first round, they could, Jackson Dart could come off the board. We could, maybe our top 3 options are gone. But second round, we could get Jalen Milroe. That's true. Second round, you probably could, but you don't have a pick in the second round, and I don't see him lasting until the third. So it, to me, really affects the strategy at this point, that they've got to get a decision.
So you're of the thought process to cut ties with Rodgers and no longer pursue that. What approach do you think that the Steelers should take? And it sounds like going through the draft. In an ideal world, what do you think the Steelers should do to best position themselves as we get closer and closer to Thursday?
I mean, it's hard to say, because nothing that they have done this offseason has been typical Steelers. Like, they have never ceded control like this to a player outside the organization. I know in a lot of ways they kind of let Ben Roethlisberger set his own tone and set his own timeline for retiring. And that in a lot of ways is understandable because of how long he was with the organization. But this Aaron Rodgers situation is unprecedented in a lot of ways for this team. At this point, I think that they are seriously looking at drafting a quarterback in the first round. And I think that they've been positioning themselves to do that if needed all along, because of hosting those guys in the pre-draft visits, because of the homework that they've done in pro days, the combine, Senior Bowl, things like that. I think that they have kind of been doing their homework all along. The way that I have been thinking about it is, I remember applying to colleges, right? In this situation, Aaron Rodgers is like their reach school, their dream school. So they're going to apply early decision to Aaron Rodgers University. And at this point, they're on the wait list. So they might get in, they might not, but like, they've got to apply to other colleges, and they've got to hope that they get some acceptances so that they have a fallback option if Aaron Rodgers University doesn't work out. So they're at the point in this process where they've gotten some acceptances back from some other schools, maybe their safety schools that they would be okay going to. Wasn't their first choice, but hey, it could still work out in the long run. Maybe there's better majors at those schools. And Thursday is kind of the day that you have to send in that non-refundable deposit. Like, okay, you might not have your answer off the wait list, but you've got to go to school somewhere in the fall. So you've got to put in that $500 or however much it is now. Doesn't mean that if you come off the wait list, you can't still go to Aaron Rodgers University, but then you will also have some money invested in another school that you can't. That's a sunk cost. I didn't do great in econ, but I do remember the sunk cost idea. And you have to look at it and say, like, okay, is whoever we draft, how are they going to be affected based on this Aaron Rodgers decision? Are we going to let this Aaron Rodgers decision affect how we've spent this $500? As you might be able to tell, I went through a very similar thing where I had a first choice school that I wanted to go to. I got waitlisted and I didn't end up going there. I came off the wait list, but I'd already sent in my deposit to UNC. And so I went there. I already had things figured out. And I was like, you know what? This was a great opportunity. It would have been, if it had been better timing, maybe I would have gone there. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers. Could be a good opportunity. If the timing had been better and it worked out, awesome. But at this point, it's not, and you have to move on.
Hey, that UNC education came through. Brooke, you landed the plane there. I understand. It's a great analogy. What are your thought processes about? I've seen reports where Shedeur Sanders could fall past the Saints at number 9 is what's out there. All right, before you answer the question, though, I guess I'm just of the thought process. I don't think Shedeur is going to be there at 21 when the Steelers pick. We'll see. But do you think Shedeur falls? And if he does, how far do you think he falls?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if the Saints pass on him at 9, then to me, the next logical landing point is the Steelers at 21. And if he's there at 21, I think you take him. I think that to me, there's still a lot of questions about him and how he'll fare in the pros. His size still makes me a little nervous. All of the sacks he took, which granted, a lot of that was a byproduct of just Colorado's poor offensive line, but he has a lot of traits that Mike Tomlin really values in players and in quarterbacks specifically. We know Mike Tomlin loves guys with NFL pedigree, NFL bloodlines. If you have a brother, a cousin, a dad, an uncle that have played in the NFL, Mike Tomlin is interested. And clearly Shedeur Sanders checks all those boxes. He also, to me, has a big personality and strong leadership traits. That's something that this offense has been missing, that they have been searching for a long time. I think that was a big reason why they brought in Russell Wilson, because they felt like, okay, this veteran leader is a guy that can give us an offensive identity. He's been there, done that. He's won the Super Bowl. He can give us on the offense what the defense has had, what the defense has. The defense has established this strong identity and they are leading the team. We need the offense to kind of be able to carry their own weight in that regard and not just kind of ride off of whatever defensive energy and identity is cultivated on that side of the ball. I think that Shedeur Sanders gives you the ability to do that. I mean, this is like you said, a big personality guy. He gets that from his dad. I think that there are a lot of things that fit well within that, but there is also the circus that would come with drafting one of Deion Sanders' kids. You know, there's going to be the constant attention on Shedeur Sanders, the media spotlight, all the things that I think in some ways are negatives with Aaron Rodgers, just this intense scrutiny, but it's also the Steelers, and they have managed this before. They kind of know the formula to keep things in-house and to keep the narratives on the track that they want them to be on. But to me, there are more pros than cons in drafting Shedeur Sanders. But the thing is now, too, with Aaron Rodgers saying what he said on Pat McAfee, it makes it very clear, to me at least, that the Steelers have to draft a quarterback this year, right? And so if they start to get antsy, and there seems like there could be a run on quarterbacks, if Shedeur Sanders slips below the Saints and the Steelers are waiting there at 21, other teams could kind of smell blood in the water and realize, like, the Steelers are hoping that he keeps falling, that they can draft him. That could give us an opportunity to jump them. Or if the Steelers get antsy and say, we think some other teams might try to jump us, we need to move up. That price is going to be a premium because everybody knows what they're going to try to be doing. And you're going to have to pay big draft capital to make moves if you feel like that's something you have to do. And so they're in a tricky situation. I do not envy them, but I think if Shedeur does not come off the board at the Saints pick, watch the Steelers, watch other teams. I think that there's going to be a lot of jockeying for positioning to try and draft him. And the Steelers are also coming into this not having their second round pick. They're going to have to mortgage some of their future to get this quarterback. They better feel really good about going all in on him or Jackson Dart or whoever it is if they feel like they have to move up to draft them.
This is why I love the drafts. Oh man, like this is why I absolutely love the draft in terms of the gamesmanship. But I want to hit on something you mentioned in terms of an offensive identity, Brooke. You've got to go back to the 2017 season was the last time the Steelers on offense had an offensive player that was an all-pro. So you talk about offensive identity, and you're talking about Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and David DeCastro. So it's been several years now where trying to get that offense back on track, it hasn't been that way for years now.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak. And I think also when you look at what the Steelers say they want to be and the moves that they have made, again, don't really square at this point, especially if they do land Aaron Rodgers Aaron Rodgers loves to throw the football. The offenses that Aaron Rodgers has been a part of are not strong running teams. The Steelers have continued to say for years that they want to be a run-first offense, or at the very least, a balanced offense. That's not what Aaron Rodgers runs. That is not what he wants to do. And then when you look at, I would expect them to draft a running back. I think that they could be in the mix for a first-round running back, depending on what happens with Aaron Rodgers. But this is at least a deep running back class that there's good value that they could get in a later round out of a running back. But still, that running back cupboard is kind of bare. I mean, I think that Jaylen Warren is a great back. Kenneth Gainwell, also obviously a good back, but I think that they're missing that, honestly, Najee Harris type of back that can be an every down back. They just need a guy like Najee Harris that averages more than 3-4 yards a carry to be an effective run game. But they've built this offensive line to be, again, a good running offense. But then at the same time, you go out and you trade for DK Metcalf. So you're going to have some kind of strong passing game, or at least a very balanced passing game. But it just feels like, without knowing who the quarterback's going to be and without seeing how that affects the draft and their draft strategy, the offensive identity is still kind of up in the air at this point.
The last topic I want to get to is the cryptic TJ Watt Instagram picture on his Instagram story entering the final year of his deal. And I look across the league where here's how I approach this. It's like, okay, Max Crosby's average annual is 35.5. Myles Garrett on a directionless Browns team just got 40 per year. Bosa just got cut and then signed with the Bills. So it's like where Watt falls and all of that. I think the floor's got to be what that Crosby and Myles Garrett deal is. And you're talking about $40 million per year. I guess I'm just of the thought process that TJ Watt should be a one-hat player. He should be a Steeler for the duration of his career, but you're going to have to pay. That conversation probably starts at $40 million per year, Brooke. So what'd you make of the post? How do you interpret all of that with the TJ Watt, with the peace picture that we saw?
I mean, TJ Watt doesn't do things accidentally. No player. I think that we are at this point where we are with social media and how players operate, how any of us operate. Everything has a meaning. And TJ Watt is not a guy to do something just because he's bored. He's not a troll. Everything he does has a purpose. He's very regimented. He's very strategic. So yeah, to me, that was him sending a signal that he's not happy with how negotiations are going. And I think he's trying to force the Steelers' hand. I think that the expectation is that they're going to get a deal done, but this is his way of saying early on, like, I'm not happy with how this is going. I will walk out this door. I don't know if he's really going to walk out the door, but I think that he's trying to take back a little bit of control in a situation where the team has the most control, that the team has, I think that the power balance is more in the favor of the team in this case. And this is TJ Watt saying, like, no, I deserve to be paid this money, and if you don't pay me, I'll leave. I do think that the Steelers are entering a time where they have to realize what it costs to play in the NFL in 2025. And the first most clear evidence of that is the Justin Fields deal that he got with the Jets. That, yes, first it sounds like a lot of money, and I forget what the exact numbers were at this point, but he is the lowest paid starting quarterback who is not on a rookie contract. And the Steelers weren't willing to offer him that contract. To me, that says that someone in that building who is controlling the checkbook doesn't understand that this is the amount of money you have to play players to compete in 2025. And I think the next kind of measuring stick for that is going to be the TJ Watt deal. Guys are not taking Pittsburgh discounts to play for the Steelers at this point. They might love Mike Tomlin, they might love their teammates, but at the end of the day, this is a business, and they might want to be a one-hat guy, or they might want to stay in Pittsburgh. But if the Steelers aren't offering I hate to say not even like the bare minimum, but if they're not trying to be competitive, players are going to say, you know what, I can make money elsewhere, and I can maybe go to a contender, or I can make another team a contender. And I think that that's kind of the reality that they're in. There are ways to massage the cap. There are ways to get creative, to add void years, whatever it is, to structure deals that it doesn't tank your cap, and allow you some flexibility still. But I think that that's where the Steelers are right now, is understanding how to pay players and what you have to pay players to keep them happy as the caps continue to rise. And as players are saying, like, look, I want to feel loyalty to this organization and to everything you've given me. But at the end of the day, like, I have to get paid. It's a business. These guys are getting paid. Why can't you come up? Like, we all have the same cap space. We're all managing caps different ways, and we all have to pay different players different amounts. But TJ Watt, at this point, I think deserves top of the market. And I think that that's how he feels, and that's what that peace sign message was about.
Yeah, even the down year for Watt is better level of production than, like, I don't know, 90% of the edge rushers in the NFL. She is the one and only Brooke Pryor. You can catch her work over on ESPN. Brooke, if there's anything you need to plug here the next week, I know you're going to be busy.
We've got a mock draft coming up on ESPN.com, NFL Nation. I am making the pick for that later this afternoon. And unfortunately for me, I don't know the Aaron Rodgers outcome. So I'm going to be flying blind, and hopefully the Steelers won't be. But I'm going to be putting myself in their shoes right now, and we will see how that goes.
Brooke, certainly appreciate your time and look forward to your coverage and your work here in the next week or so as we get closer and closer to the 2025 NFL Draft. Again, thank you to Brooke Pryor. My name is Mark Bergin. Thanks for watching and listening to the Bleav in Steelers show. I'll see you next week. Until then, take care, and so long, everybody.